around fasting and PCOS. So polycystic ovary syndrome. So many women I know suffer with this. And I know this is kind of one of the big burning questions. We had this from a few people. So I'd love you to answer this question for Ruth.
PCOS is the number one hormonal problem for women in their 20s and the 30s. And I'll give you a 53-year-old perspective. We never talked about PCOS when I was in my 20s and 30s. It wasn't around. So when these new diagnoses appear, we have to scratch our head and go, what is at the root that's in the modern world right now? And there are two things that I would encourage Ruth to look at. The first is insulin resistance. So the greatest way to pull a woman out of insulin resistance is to fast like a girl. I have seen that work over and over and over again. So, make sure that she is knowing when to fast and when not to, bringing carbs down and bringing carbs up, learn that ebb and flow. The second one is toxic load. And this is huge because we have more toxins in our beauty products, in our perfumes, on our clothing. We have phthalates that come off our clothing now. Our furniture, toxins are everywhere. So what I always say is let's start by learning the ebbs and flows of fasting like a girl. And I will tell you that I've now seen thousands and thousands of women who have reversed PCOS just by fasting like a girl. And if that doesn't work for Ruth, or she's like, I'm not really getting the symptom relief that I want, then we got to look at the toxic load. But when we pair those two things together, where we get a woman insulin sensitive and we bring her toxic load down, I can't tell you, we have yet to see a PCOS condition that we haven't been able to help by addressing those two things. It's literally that simple. The modern world has caused PCOS to emerge. So let's undo the modern world.
I mean, I would just even say simply go and look at your comments on YouTube, right? It's like such a powerful explanation and it's right in our face to say this is actually working for everyday people that are coming on and they're sharing their stories of fasting like a girl and what they've been through and how much they've kind of encountered during their journey. And I think the toxic load is so interesting. It's something we don't talk about enough. And we had Dr. Larissa Corder on the last season, she's a gynecologist, and she spoke so heavily around the toxic load that we're using in our house, from our cleaning products to our deodorants that we're putting on our body, that's actually causing infertility in men and women.
You know what I always say is we're in an evolutionary mismatch right now with our hormones. So the modern world is actually destroying the female body quicker than it's destroying the male body, but it's both of us. And it comes from the physical, emotional, chemical toxins that just keep going up and up and up. It's quite a conversation to have, but we just need to start with what do we put on our skin? Because ask yourself, here's a good one. Ask yourself, would I eat what I'm putting on my skin? If the answer is no, you've got the wrong skincare product. Because all the natural skincare product lines will say, this is pure whole foods. It's just we put it in a cream and you can eat it. If you can't eat it, and same thing with your household cleaners, then get rid of it.
It's interesting as well. I always think about, as we're having this conversation, just becoming more intuitive with your body. And actually, when does your body need that food? And how are you feeling right now? And how are you feeling after you've eaten a meal? I think all of these systems play such a big part. And it leads me into wanting to really speak about these 4 phases that as women, we all go through. And I love how you describe them in your book, these 4 phases, which I think just makes it so much more accessible for women to understand.
Thank you. Yeah, and I love that you got the simplicity of the names, because one of my missions is to help bring the language of hormones to the world. And when we talk follicular, luteal, everybody falls asleep.
As a dyslexic, it's my worst.
Yes. So you and I have that. So I'm not dyslexic, but I had a learning disability as a child. So I had to learn to take complicated concepts and make them very simple. Yeah. So when I first started learning the hormonal cycle, I was like, okay, wait, how about we call this something like the power phase and manifestation and nurture, so that we can make it really easy for people to understand. Yeah. So day 1 to day 10 is what I call the power phase. And here's the way I want women to think about this. The first couple of days of your cycle, you have a hormonal crash. So your hormones are at the lowest on day 1. Prior to that, right before you started to bleed, your hormone, specifically progesterone, had to peak. in order for that uterine lining to shed. So she's at her highest, giving you a lot of GABA, you're feeling all warm and fuzzy, and then boom, period starts, and now you're bleeding and progesterone's out. So the first couple of days, or there's a little bit of a transition, but pretty much those first 10 days, your body now starts to ramp up estrogen. And estrogen, like we mentioned, wants you to power up on your health habits. Estrogen's like, eat right for me, please exercise, please keep glucose down. If you want to put your party hat on and go out and dance all night long, you can do that. You can, we're crazy powerful when estrogen comes in. If you want to take on a big workload, go for it. So outside of those first couple of days, I always say like that first 10-day period, power up on life, power up on health. That's why I called it the power phase.
I love that.
Right? I mean, it just makes it easy.
I love it. Book in those big meetings. Book them in.
I just talked to a woman yesterday who told me what she does is from about day 3 all the way actually through ovulation, and we'll talk about that in a moment. She does she can take on like 3 to 5 hours of Zoom calls. But then the week before her period, she shuts that down and only does 2 Zoom calls a week.
Well, that's me. My podcasts,
yeah.
Right? Like I track my cycle just because I get really affected with PMS. And 3 or 4 days before my period, absolutely, I'm not having any big conversation. I'm not recording any podcast. I'm not engaging in anything that needs a rational mind because I'm just not in that state.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And we should all be doing that. We should all be, this is the thing about Fast Like a Girl that was just excited me so much is now women are going, okay, well, if I'm supposed to time fasting and food to my life, how should I time my work? How should I time my fitness? So we're starting to get that education now, which is great. Then day 11 to day 15, this is ovulation, your ovulation window. I just want to, a lot of women aren't even aware of this. We all ovulated a little, one, you might do a day 11, another woman does day 15. We're ovulating really different. But what's magical about this time is you've got estrogen at her peak, the highest she'll be all month long. You've got testosterone at its peak, highest she'll be. We got to make them all she'll be at her point of the day of the month. And then you've got a little bit of progesterone. And so progesterone is there to calm you. So I called it the manifestation phase because we all know we're fertile that time. But with these 3 hormones, you actually have highest creativity. You have the highest ability to be able to do work. Like everything is going to be at its peak during this manifestation time, which means it's a good time for a shorter fast. 15 hours is about max. You could even maybe go to 17 if you're an experienced faster. But you don't really want to push it during this time. There's a better tool for you, which is food. And why I think that is important is because during this hormonal rush, a lot of women will detox a little bit more. A lot of women don't have a really good gut, so they need to focus on more foods that support the microbiome. So I like women during this period to keep a moderate fasting level and really go into what I call hormone feasting foods, where we're just bringing glucose up and we're supporting the microbiome in a different way during that 5-day window.
Okay, check this out. I have a free fasting guide for you all. It's free. And it's going to teach you all the basics of fasting. It's going to teach you how to kill hunger when you fast, which is really cool. And it's going to show you how to break your fast, among many other things. All you got to do is click on this link right here and enjoy.
Wow. And that's the manifestation window. And just before in the power window, how long should women fast for or be looking to fast for in that window if they're applying that concept?
Okay, so day 1 to day 10 is what I called the power phase. And the reason I called it this is because this is the time you can really power up on all your health tools. So this isn't just fasting. This can be, if you love the ketogenic diet, you can go really low carb at this time. If you really are a fitness hound and you want to push a workout, these 10 days is really perfect to do that. And then when we look at like social events and work events, you could party all night. You can take on more challenges at work. Over these 10 days, estrogen is going to build. And estrogen, again, is very cortisol forgiving. And estrogen wants glucose low. So this makes a great time for all of those fitness habits that you have, but it also makes a really good time for fasting, especially those that want to do like a 3-day water fast. It's a great time. Or you want to push it to the 36-hour fast and see if you can unstick some weight. Great time.
So it sounds between those 1 and 10 days is when we kind of like literally all our hard meetings, when we schedule in any of our big training, when we have those stresses in our lives that sometimes we are just not ready to face. We face them in this power 10 days in the beginning of our period. And that's
right.
when you mentioned keto, which is kind of a lower carb, high fat diet that many people might know about or might be on, is to do it in this phase of the cycle.
Exactly. And this was, if you think about where the media took keto and fasting for women, is they said women shouldn't do keto, women shouldn't fast. But what they forgot, the part of the conversation is, and the way it should have been explained, is women should fast and do keto at certain times of the month. And one of them is in that first 10 days. So that's why I called it the power phase.
Amazing. That just gives it so much kind of encouragement in those first kind of 10 days when we really go for it. And it's true, I book in a lot of my meetings in the first half of my menstrual cycle.
Yeah, which makes total sense. And this is where I want to take the information that I taught the world on fasting and food. I want to take it to relationships and work and fitness, and so that women start to see that we're meant to ebb and flow in our energy output. So this is why I'm like, anytime estrogen's coming in, you're going to be more extroverted. Now, I know if you're an introvert listening to this, you're like, I'm never extroverted. I have some friends that when I say that, they're like, whatever, that doesn't make sense. But you will be the most extroverted version of yourself, because that's what estrogen demands. Is it's a much more upbeat type of hormone. So match your lifestyle to that upbeat personality that estrogen has.
That's good for your partner to know.
Oh my gosh.
To have those hard conversations in the first 10 days.
Oh, I can't tell you how many men have come up to me and said that they actually, once they understood, they're reading the book, and once they understood how women should fast, they actually started to understand their wives and their sisters and their friends a lot better.
This book is not just for women. I will just point that out here.
Yeah.
Everyone should read this book. You should understand one another and our relationships and our work commitments and all of these things. We work on this acyclic cycle that we have the same week every week, Monday to Friday. For men, that can be great, but for women, it doesn't work that way. And I think it's really important that we have this discussion about it.
Okay, so if you love this video, you're going to want to check out the next video in my fasting series. I know that fasting helps you lose weight without changing your food, but if you're intermittent fasting and gaining weight, then I really recommend that you look at 3 food changes.